ladies and gentlemen, let's use this part of the stream for the YouTube segment. Right. My name is Alexander, also known as Senderievitz, and in this YouTube segment I would like to talk about how good is the Lighting Trap Assassin for the leveling in at least second half of Nightmare difficulty, although, to be honest, you could start leveling with her even from the start of Nightmare difficulty. There are two approaches to this. I personally used the same approach that I used when I was playing as the druid, you know, complete first act with fire element, and the second first difficulty, and then the second difficulty until Act 4 also rely on fire element. I use the same thing with this class, and then I spec'd into lighting traps, and there is a lot to talk about. Let's start with something that something that I would want to highlight, and that is Shadow Disciplines. Now, Claw Masteries is just a filler skill for you to get to Burst of Speed. Now, I have leveled up Burst of Speed until level 6. This is enough for unlocking the breakpoints, attack speed breakpoints for your weapon that you're planning to be using, like Spirit, or in my case it's already Flail with Heart of the Oak Rune Ward, so that you will be able to place those traps faster, use those grenades from Fire Blast faster, and run faster to kite those enemies. Again, just 6 levels are more than enough, and as far as Nightmare difficulty goes, I can say that you will be relying more on this skill because the monsters' health and their defenses will naturally increase. Is going to increase, especially on Hell mode. And if you are decent at kiting, not superb, but decent at kiting, it's not going to be a problem for you to run in circles or in any kind of figures around the enemies when your merc or your traps are killing them. What else? Cloak of Shadow. Psychic Hammer is just a filler skill to get to Cloak of Shadow and then later to the Mind Blast. I did not understood the importance of the Cloak of Shadows yet. Yeah, I see the benefit, like, because it blinds the enemies, like lowering their defense, and it also boosts up your own defense. But to be honest, I haven't seen any visual representation, a visual hint that I could rely upon when I was using this skill only. Like, I was using the skill only against tag bosses, and it did not work against Diablo, it did not work against Bale. Maybe it doesn't work against bosses, maybe it only works against regular enemies, but I don't see that much of... I don't see why you would want to use this skill, because you're already killing enemies so fast with your traps, and maybe if you encounter like lighting immune monsters and you want to use Fire Blast in combination with Cloak of Shadow, the importance and the benefits of the skill is going to be more significant. But as of right now, I have not used this skill too many times or too often, and I don't see that much of a benefit out of it. Like, sure, you select it, you cast it, and that's, yeah, the defense increases there, but unfortunately I don't see, like, I can show it to you immediately what I'm talking about. So let's find the enemy. Those are the enemies. Cloak of Shadow. I see this hint on top of them, yeah, like this smoke, but in the midst of the battle, it's easy to confuse them with other special effects, you know, with your lighting traps are being fired, with other curses, with other things. I wish, though, this kind of special effect would have been more visually distinguishable. And as far as those benefits goes, I don't think it's that much. I don't think it's that great of a skill, at least for Nightmare difficulty. Maybe on Hell, like I've said, it will be more. I will find more usage out of this, but as of right now, I am not benefiting by having the skill. Mind Blast. Mind Blast, I already see the greatness behind this skill. This allows you to stun and or control those enemies that you are using this skill against. It's great because you can spam it. Doesn't have any kind of cooldown. Another thing that is great, it's also works in an area of effect, which is super helpful not only for saving yourself but also for saving your merc from those nasty enemies that tends to surround them. You just spam this thing and then you switch to your offensive spells, and with the help of them you kill somebody or something that attacks you or your merc. This has both the great visual representation of the skill itself, visual hint that you can rely upon, and sound effect too. When you control the enemies, it goes like this, like oh, and you can see the sign of like the confusing sign, which for some reason looks like a tornado, but who cares? Like this Mind Blast, it's really great, and you most certainly will be using it even on Nightmare, starting from Nightmare difficulty, and on Hell for sure. Otherwise, you'll be having a very hard time, at least when you are leveling, to save yourself if you are surrounded, or save your merc if he is surrounded. Because sometimes the sheer damage alone will not be enough, from my point of view. And it's good for crowd control, it's good for escaping dangerous situations. It's pretty... I like the... Okay, I guess my merc killed somebody. It's good for a lot of those situations, and I have nothing negative to say about the skill. Actually, like, returning back to the Cloak of Shadows, it's not that this skill, it's not that I could say something negative about it, it's just that on Nightmare difficulty, I don't see the reason why you want to use Cloak of Shadows. That's pretty much the whole point. Whereas Mind Blast will be useful all the time, like, literally whenever you unlock it, all the way up until the end, when you are farming, especially when you don't have beast gear, when you are leveling, and so on and so forth. What can I say? Well, I guess let's switch to the traps. Fire Blast. Fire Blast on Nightmare I had to find its usefulness only when I fought against rare occurrence of... against some rare groups of enemies with lightning immune. That's pretty much it. Now on Hell difficulty, things will definitely change. There will be a lot more enemies with lightning immune, so I will use the skill more. I already covered in depth this skill and its mechanics in my first part of the video. If you haven't check it out, you can check this video on my YouTube channel, when I did the overview guide about the Fire Trap Assassin. But just to make things short, this skill allows you to attack enemies from the greater distance. So let's say you're standing on one end of the screen, you can throw it like this. You can throw those grenades. It's not a trap, it's grenades. You can throw them over the obstacles, you can throw them over the water, over chasms. You can also throw them in such a way, like in a line in front of the enemies, like let's say melee guys charging towards you, you want to hit them. They have extra fast, but you are certain that you can hit them. You can do the line, like throw the line like this, and they are going to explode. Because like there's a short delay when the grenade hits the ground before it's going to explode. And as far as the Nightmare difficulty goes, once again, for Nightmare difficulty, this skill is mostly a filler for you to be able to go towards your main offensive lighting trap skills. Speaking of them, Lighting Sentry is going to be your first trap that you will use for Nightmare difficulty leveling. Now, mechanics. Let's say what this thing says. Like, traps that shoot lightning, scorch passing through the enemies, shoots 10 times. Now, because it shoots 10 times in comparison to Wake of Fire, which only was shooting 5 times, you don't have to recast them too often. That's a great thing. The second thing which is great is that it covers huge range in comparison to Wake of Fire. Because this skill that Lighting Traps does is basically Lighting Sentry. It's basically chain lighting from a sorceress. I hope I pronounced it correctly. It's a chain lighting. It passes through the enemies, it staggers some of them, and I will get to the stagger point a little bit later. But when you place it on the ground here, those traps can fire from one end of the screen or here to the other side of the screen. And even when you are running, the spell itself can continue to travel and hits enemies that are not even on your screen yet. That's the cool aspect about it. Now, to get the another important thing that I wanted to cover when it comes to mechanics of this spell is the damage. The damage difference, you know, it says like from 1 to 3538. This damage difference, it's because when lighting passes through the enemies, in order for it to hit, to do 3.5k damage, all the hits, all the lighting needs to pass through the enemies and through the monster or an enemy must not have any kind of defense. If you don't stagger him, if he moves away, like only a part of the lighting hits them, then the damage will be greatly reduced. This is why the difference is such huge. This is why it's such a huge difference between the damage from 1 until 3.5k. And this leads me to another, well, not necessarily negative thing, kind of a drawback, because in comparison to Wake of Fire that staggered enemies pretty effectively, this thing doesn't. I don't know if chain lighting, if it works, if chain lighting with Sorceress also doesn't stagger enemies completely, but whenever this thing passes through the enemies, some are staggerable, you can transform them into the hit recovery status, but some doesn't. Some just takes a hit and continue to run either towards you and your merc. It's important because if you think that you will be doing, like, you might look at the damage numbers and say like, oh my god, like this damage number is like insanely high, I will be nuking the like any of those monsters when I'm leveling. It's not necessarily the case, because most of them can circle around, they can surround you, and also those traps, just like with Wake of Fire, just like with any other traps as far as I understood, you cannot force them to attack the targets that you want. They will select the targets automatically, yes, but if you want to focus fire somebody, you can do this. As simple as that. Another thing that I also wanted to cover about those traps is their numbers, because you will be using not only Lighting Sentry but Dead Sentry, which I'm going to talk a little bit about it later. The amount of the traps will always stay the same, the maximum limit of it. It's 5, no matter what. So you place 5 Lighting Sentry, see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, let's put it like this, 5. You want to place 1 Dead Sentry, look what happens. Boom, previous thing got destroyed. By the way, I only now noticed that they look pretty much identical, but in terms of their visual design, but that's not the point. So I don't know even right now what is the optimal number between Dead Sentry and Lighting Sentry traps. I mean, in terms of what setup should you use to kill enemies in the fastest way possible. Currently, I'm experimenting between like 2 Lighting, 3 Dead Sentry, 3 Lighting, 2 Dead Sentry, or just 5 Lighting Sentry. I don't know. For now, all I can say that because of the range benefits, because of the damage benefits, and because you can stagger enemies, some of the enemies, sometimes, it's a very useful tool and much better tool in comparison to Wake of Fire. Even if Wake of Fire was staggering enemies more often, obviously it did way less damage, and the range was very limited. So yeah, that's about it when it comes to Lighting Sentry. Now, let's move slowly but surely towards Dead Sentry. As far as the Dead Sentry goes, it says here in the skill description that not only that it shoots lighting at your enemies, or explodes nearby corpses, laying waste to more enemies, so it does corpse explosion. The damage of this corpse explosion is way less. Well, it's less in comparison to the Necromancer's corpse explosion. Necro does like from 100 to 120 or 140%. This says that it does from 40 to 80%. It is still a very useful tool, like you can count it as your secondary offensive skill that you will be using if you want to bypass lighting immune and there are corpses, and you can use that sentry to kill those lighting immune enemies by corpse explosion. Now, this trap also fires lighting, but the damage that it does with lighting, that sentry, it's obviously way less in comparison to lighting sentry. Even though your skill could be fully maxed out, the damage is way less. Also, another important thing with that sentry, if there are corpses around you or around the trap, it will not shoot lighting. If there's a battle going on, there's a living enemy, and you place the dead sentry, it will always prioritize doing this corpse explosion over just shooting lighting at the enemies. It's good, like in my point of view, it's good, but in some situations, you know, I haven't gotten into the hell difficulty yet, but maybe if there is an enemy which is both like physical, which has both like physical immune and lighting immune stuff, maybe you don't want to explode corpses yet, maybe you just want to ignore it, but it's still, I still wanted to talk about this aspect. So if you want to save corpses for future fights, you can do this, because another important feature with that sentry skill is that it will only going to perform corpse explosion when it sees the enemies approaching its position. So if you are worried about, like, let's say you're farming Bale waves that I am going to just accidentally explode all the corpses, it won't going to happen. Corpse explosion will only happen once the enemies are approaching the position of the dead sentry traps. That's it. Otherwise, you can place all 5 of them on the pile of corpses and nothing will happen at all, unless there's an enemy nearby. What else? I covered already this. Lighting Sentry also it receives benefits when it comes to damage from Shockwave, from Charged Bolt Sentry, which is this spell, and from that Sentry, which is why I'm maxing them out. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. All the other skills, I mean, Shockwave and Charged Bolt Sentry, even though they're there, they are just filler skills. Their sole purpose is to boost the damage of your Lighting Sentry and slightly of your Dead Sentry. That's pretty much it. Nothing in martial arts as always, and yeah, that's pretty much the whole skill setup. I think I covered it in as much details as I could, at least with such a limited experience that I have, only playing through the Act 4 and Act 5 and cow level on Nightmare difficulty with the Lighting Trap Assassin. Obviously, I missed, but maybe I have missed something, and more experienced players with Lighting Trap with this class could actually say or correct it, could actually say what I missed or corrected me if I'd made some mistakes when it comes to explaining those nuances that I covered. But I think it's pretty much it. I haven't missed anything important. I covered everything about traps, I covered everything about shadow disciplines, yeah. And as in the overview about what do I think of this particular style, archetype and gameplay with this class, I like it from an offensive standpoint. I like it better than Druid, because I am not a close range caster. I can kite effectively. My kiting skills allow me to escape a lot of dangerous situations and maneuver around various threats, as well as I enjoy controlling those hordes of monsters with Mind Blast, thus allowing me to survive, allowing my merc to survive better, and also break through some break from some kind of like some kind of ambushes, or when enemies are surrounding me. Because in comparison to the Druid, the only thing that you could like, you could do this with other characters too, but as when it comes to druid, it's like you're a close range caster. Yes, you have damage absorption, but it only works against magical attacks, and for the most part you have to stay close to the enemies and hit them. With this class, it's easier to play safe. Maybe, of course, it's not so easy as Bone Necro, who has like Bone Prison and Bone Wall, but it's much safer in comparison to the druid, because your traps... Oh, I have forgotten to talk about the aspect of the Lighting Sentry trap, is that Lighting Sentry doesn't shoot... It doesn't allow you to shoot through the huge obstacles, like rivers or chasms. The lighting is going to disappear when it's going to hit this obstacle. So, but you can still place those traps over those obstacles if the game will allow you to do so. In some cases it allows you to do so, in some cases it doesn't. So you can experiment and find the ideal range where you can create those traps and set up those scenarios where you can demolish some enemies even before they get to you. So yeah, that's going to be it when it comes to the overview. One thing I will say, that in this overview, just like in the previous overviews that I have done, I only talk about the mechanical nuances of the skills and skills themselves in general. I'm not analyzing the leveling process from the standpoint of a player has a gear or a player has not the gear, because if you have noticed, I haven't talked about any of my gear pieces at all. You could have I did this on purpose, because if a person watches this, he may not have anything. He may just started playing this game and he just wants to know how those skills are functioning, rather than, oh, I have like this, how it's going to impact. No, I don't cover this in my overview. If you want me to cover such things as well, make sure to leave a comment about this in the comment section when I'm going to upload this video to YouTube. And as a final words, what do I think about this class? Is it good for leveling on Nightmare and on Hell difficulty? On Nightmare difficulty from the second half, I think it's not only. I think it's a very good choice, especially if you like safety, if you like kiting enemies around, controlling those hordes with Mind Blast, if you also enjoy setting up like those big those scenarios where you could output great amount of damage, this is going to be a great choice for you. And if you also enjoy the lighting element as a whole, because there's from my point of view, this is a good competition between like this class, between Lighting Chavazon and between Lighting Sorceress. And when it comes to gear dependency, even though I didn't cover it, I'd say that from my point of view, this Lighting Trap Assassin is not so gear dependent compared to those two previous classes, Lighting Chavazon and Lighting Sorc. But yeah, guys, this is going to be it when it comes to giving you my overview of this class. Once again, my name was Alexander, also known as Sandrjevits, and feel free to leave your comments in the comment section when this video is going to be uploaded to YouTube. What do you think about Lighting Trap Assassin? Did you play with her? Are you planning to play with her? And did you also like this explanation that I have done about those mechanics of the skills, and do you want to see more of them? Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, click the post notification bell on MightyBrosky YouTube channel if you want to see more of those videos in the future. And this is going to be it. See you in the next videos.